Good afternoon, good day, good morning, whenever you're watching this. Welcome, and as you can see, there's a co-host. Surprise, surprise! This is Nadine. Nadine. So this is not our guest yet. She will be introduced in a few short moments, but maybe first I have to look that way, right? Nadine, can you tell the audience who you are?
Of course. Thank you very much, Lawrence, for inviting me and for being able to be a part of your great series here on YouTube. So, hi, everyone. My name is Nadin Raba. I used to work together with Lawrence at the Google News Initiative as a teaching fellow for the DACH area. And of course, I'm still super interested in everything concerning media innovation. Really looking forward to this session today and to discuss some methods that could be very helpful for all of us, right?
Yes, and it's so great to have you here because you've done a lot of research for this episode as well. So you're already very welcome on the team. And for the first-time viewers, this is Future Journalism Today Live. Welcome once again. You can use the chat right there to ask questions or to put in links or things you want to give shout-outs to your mom. Everything is fine, but please do use it to ask Alina Fichter, our main and special guest today, the questions. And now we sort of agreed, Nadine, that you will introduce Alina, but first let's get her on the stream and let's welcome her.
Hi.
There she is. Welcome, Alina.
Hello.
Thank you for having me.
So great to have you.
Well, great that you could join us. And you, at the moment, you work for Deutsche Welle, but we need to know a lot more about you before we go into our usual segments and items. Nadine, could you take it away?
Of course. So for today, the segments will be, of course, the great talk with Alina about her work at Deutsche Welle. Lawrence, would you like to introduce everyone to the next points that we're going to talk about?
Yes, that is a good thing. And I think we have to show on the show today. Yes?
Yes.
And if you could flip it through, because obviously what we always do in the show, just as a little explanation, we have an unboxing or live demo, and it will be a live demo of a favorite creative tool by Alina, if I'm not mistaken. The other thing is Stop It Journalist, where we ask our guests to give some advice to stop doing, but to turn it into a more positive note and tell people what they should be doing and what they should be using. And big and very important part of the live show is the live Q&A with the audience. So we have a segment for that, but please feel free at any moment to ask your questions and to say hi to Alina or Nadine or me. So that's basically how we roll with the Future Journalism Today Live.
Yes, right. Thank you very much, Lawrence. And I would say I'm going to introduce our guest next up. We are really happy that you're here, Alina, and please correct me if you, please add any kind of information that you think is important if I haven't explained everything well enough. But there's going to be quite a monologue right now, so please prepare everyone, and I hope you have enough patience for me talking, because of course Alina's resume is very impressive. So let's start. Alina, your name is Alina Fichter, just to keep it all correctly. And your current position is Head of Digital Format Development at Deutsche Welle in Berlin, in Germany. Just a short intro about Deutsche Welle, because we are talking to an international crowd today, of course. So Deutsche Welle is a German public international broadcaster based in Bonn and in Berlin. It has an audience of 197 million people weekly, and there are both TV and radio programs. So you could listen to Deutsche Welle on the radio, or you could watch some TV program as well. Deutsche Welle Radio is available in 30 languages, which is insane, 30 languages, catering to a worldwide audience, of course. And the TV broadcasts are available in English, German, Spanish, and in Arabic.
And may I ask, Alina, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, Nadine. May I ask, Alina, what kind of which are your equivalents in other countries? So, who are your sort of your friends or family in Europe or?
Yeah, so BBC Worldwide would be right, a competitor or a frenemy, or however you want to call it, or France Media Monde. That would be the two biggest competitors in Europe. Yeah, and I think the reach got up a little bit, but that's just a detail.
That's good to know. It's always good.
The numbers are could be even more, or I could have looked for even newer numbers. Okay, but that's all about Deutsche Welle right now, just for everyone to know. Okay, where Alina is working at the moment. Plus, you're a member of the Global Advisory Board at NewsGuard, which is a journalism and technology company that rates the credibility of news and information websites and tracks online misinformation, which is, of course, very important nowadays as well.
Yeah. If I could add, the main goal of NewsGuard is to get rid of disinformation, right? So that's what it's all about. That's why I love supporting them. Yeah.
Definitely, which is a very important task too. Lawrence, would you like to add something?
No, I just said great. I think it's it's a very good cause. Yeah.
All right. So before you started at Deutsche Welle, you've done so much work. You've worked, for example, in the Silicon Valley as a consultant and a journalist. You've been a member of the chief editorial team at ZEIT Online, which is a media outlet in Germany, in Hamburg, and in Berlin as well. And you've been in charge of subscriptions, podcasts, and videos. So super interesting to me, especially because I podcast as well. You worked for German media outlets such as Süddeutsche Zeitung, Die Zeit, Bayerischer Rundfunk, etc. And you've graduated the German School of Journalism, which is known all over the country. And something that we are going to talk about a bit more today. You've been a John S. Knight Fellow of Media Innovation at Stanford University, which is the birthplace of design thinking. And there your passion for user-centric journalism was sparked as well. On top, one fact I found out about you as well is you spent 1 year each living in California, in Honduras, in Ecuador, and in France as well, which is crazy to me. So, Alina, if you could go back to one of those countries after COVID-19, where would you go first?
Wow. Oh, that's a great question. First of all, thank you so much. I feel really flattered. What a kind introduction.
Of course, it's all true.
What would be the first country I'd go to? Actually, it would be Honduras. So I spent a year there when I was 16. And I went to school and I lived with a Honduran family. Wait, I see myself now, so I stopped sharing my screen. Does that make sense? Or is that normal that I see myself?
That's normal. Yeah.
Okay, it's a little irritating, but okay. So I lived with a Honduran family, right? Back in the times, and I was only 16, so they really integrated me. And I'm still in touch with them every week, actually. And I worry about them a little bit with the whole COVID situation. So that's the first place I'd go to without COVID, for sure.
So visiting your old family, to say it like that. Okay. Did you already work as a journalist during your time in Honduras, or did you start a bit later?
I started later. So I was only 16. I hadn't even finished school then. When did I start to work as a journalist? I think when I started studying, when I was around 19, 20 in Cologne, that's when I started working as a journalist. Yeah.
Okay. So in Cologne, you've been studying economics, right?
That's right. Okay. So I like numbers and I like words.
Yeah, a journalist that can read and do the maths as well, which is great.
And so then I was wondering. And I don't know if Nadine, if I'm interrupting with your flow, but Alina, can you tell us how you went from? So you say I like numbers, I like words, and then you went to D school in Stanford. Yeah. Why? How does it connect?
Yeah, how does it connect? So yeah, that's a good question. So I think for me, there was a critical point when I was working for Die Zeit as a reporter in Hamburg. Yeah. So I was a media and tech reporter in Hamburg, right? And a super privileged job, fantastic job. Yet there was one thing that was kind of bothering me a tiny little bit, and that was that part of the job is a finger pointing, right? You always have to write about other media and how they're not moving fast enough with the whole digital transformation, etc.
Yeah.
And I think there was a point where I was wondering whether I could not, do more about this digital transformation instead of just writing about what others were doing wrong, right? Yeah. And during that time as a tech reporter, I traveled to Silicon Valley a few times. And I think that was when the spark came up, right? I wanted to understand deeper, like the way of thinking there and how we could apply it to journalism. I think that was the critical point for me.
Yeah, okay. And maybe we go into that in a bit more depth later on, but
sure.
Makes sense, yeah?
Definitely. I would love to hear more about your time in Stanford and how you've managed to get into this great fellowship there at Stanford University. So maybe you would like to share with us in your presentation what you learned about design thinking, for example.
Sure.
And you might have to share your screen again, because when I did your solo layout, there it is again. So I'll add it to the screen. And, yeah.
Sorry, that was the wrong one.
We're going to share it with the entire audience.
I can do it later on. I'll try and present first. Cool. So can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, great.
Perfect. Cool. Yeah, so we just talked about the starting point, right? And when I was working for die ZEIT, which I really enjoyed, right, as a reporter. And I think this interview with a guy called Dieter von Holzbrink was done exactly 5 years ago when die ZEIT became 70. And he talks about what it was like when he bought die ZEIT, that he came into the space in Hamburg, and the editors were sitting there waiting for him and asking him, so what do you think who we do die ZEIT for? And he said, well, I'm guessing for the reader. And then they said, no, we do the newspaper that we want to do. And that's kind of, I think the attitude a lot of journalists have, and that we know best what our users want. And for me, human-centered design is the opposite, right? So this is Dave Kelly, another guy with not very much hair. He's the inventor of design thinking, right? And he kind of put that attitude on the feet and said, okay, if we want to develop a product or a format or whatever, we first have to think about the user needs. We really, really, really have to understand the users, the clients, the needs, and the deeper ones, right? Not the obvious ones. So he's kind of a researcher, a designer and a researcher of user needs. And that really got me hooked. Because with the changing media consumption habits we have in journalism, I think there's so much value in really understanding what news are for, right?
Can you answer that question yourself?
No. I think it's an everyday struggle to try and answer it again and again. And I think that's the good part of it, right? Because the answer is so complex that we have to find new answers for new target groups every day. And that's what I find super exciting in my job.
Yeah.
Definitely,
great. Yeah. You can't just say it depends, because it depends on your sort of your mission, your guiding principles as a newspaper and in your newsroom, right? And what you're trying to achieve with your audience, how your business model looks. I think right? Or
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Deutsche Welle. As Nadin said, there's 30 languages, so there's target groups all over the world.
Yeah.
And I'm working on a few projects for young Indian target groups, right? So to get an understanding for them is a totally different story than to work for people in Iran, right? Yeah. And then even if you only have one country, people are so different. So yes,
But are you convinced that you can apply design thinking in Iran, in Germany, and in Honduras in the same way?
I probably wouldn't say in the same way. So that's something I learned when I started at Deutsche Welle, right? That so I spent a lot of time at D-School when I was at Stanford, day and night, because I was so excited about everything you can learn there. And when I started at Deutsche Welle, I realized that you cannot just apply what you learned in school, basically in the same way in a company. you have to apply it to what is given there, right? So you have to switch a few things and invent a few things to make it applicable to the organization you work for. And I think the same thing is true for the countries you were talking about. For example, the project we're working on right now in India, so the user interviews we do, that we'll talk about in just a second, we do them as a team. So we have a colleague from Germany mostly, and then a colleague from India, because there is a cultural bridge we have to build, right? So users we interview in India via Zoom answer in a different way when there's only a person from the Western world than if there is a person they're more familiar with. Right?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so those are things we really have to think about.
You have to really adhere to the cultural sensitivities and customs and
absolutely,
okay.
Yeah. And language-wise as well, right? Like I have a German accent, and then people in India are like don't really understand sometimes, and so those are things you have to think about when you work in different places. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe before wonderful. I just wanted to ask you before we are going to continue with the discussion. Maybe you could explain a little bit how design thinking is working for journalists, especially.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question. That's what I was where I was going at right now. So those are like funny, colorful bubbles that might look a little weird at the beginning. It's just the 5 phases of design thinking, and where we as journalists just did formats we thought of would be best for the users, right? Like I said in the beginning. Journalists just used to say, okay, I know what's best for the users. Bam, there was an article format, whatever. And some of them, I have to say, of course, worked fantastically. So I'm not at all dogmatic. We don't have to use that like all the time. But I think there is a lot of use in it for different occasions. So the difference from like what we used to do as journalists and what we can do now is mainly the first 2 points, empathy and define, right? So empathy means what we just talked about. You made a decision, for example, like us. Okay, we want to target young Indians. So what do? We try to find all studies, everything we can find about young Indians and their media consumption habits and what they like and dislike, etc. So we really are, as a team, number crunchers and try to find and evaluate everything we can. And then a large and the most important part of this empathy part, this first part, is to do user interviews. Because in order to find out more about the feelings and hence the needs of people, user interviews are really the best way to do that. And after you have gathered like all that data, you can define the direction you want to go into. And we call that like the problem definition. So for example, how can we create a format for a young Indian audience that wants to break the traditions because they feel locked in? I'm inventing, right? It might go in this direction, it might not. Because with the lockdown, they just feel they can't do the progressive things they used to do, something like that. And then like the most fun part comes with the ideation, the brainstorming, super creative. And after that phase, you can build a prototype and test it rapidly. So prototype doesn't mean the perfect format. As journalists, we try to be a little bit too perfect in that sometimes. Prototype just means something really fast, cheap, boom, and then you test it with users. So those are the 5 phases of design thinking. And the main part is to really listen carefully to your users before you start developing a format. So that's the main difference from what we used to do.
And if I may ask, what would you consider the main difference of doing user research interviews and doing interviews as a journalist? What will be the main difference?
Yeah, good question. The main difference is, I think sometimes as journalists, we might tend to push people somewhere. And with those empathy interviews, you just listen. You listen more. You leave more space for the person, right? Yeah, you don't provoke people in order to get an information, right? You don't push people in order to get an information. It's more like you leave the person a lot of space, sometimes there is silence, and sometimes out of the silence there is something really interesting that comes out, and you ask why as often as you can, because
At least 5 times, right? 5 times.
At least 5 times. If you've ever tried to do that, it feels awkward in the beginning, and then you get really deep down to feelings, to needs, and that's something you can work with fantastically. So I would say that's the main difference. But Lawrence, what would you say is the main difference?
No, I would think so too. Just be curious and don't look for answers. Just don't look for specific or particular answers, but just think about, if you say, how was it like to buy your first car, or what would your next trip be if we're coming out of lockdown, your overseas trip? Then don't write an article, but just listen and be curious. And then when you get everything together, it might show you that you don't need to do an article, but you have to just make sounds of Bangalore or Honduras beaches, or I don't know. Yeah. And that might be your article. And so don't write about it. Just give people a chance to dream away. That might be very inspiring, instead of writing about where people would like to go.
Yeah, it's true. I really like how you put it. It's like, leave space for surprises, right? You don't have time sometimes as a journalist to do that, but here you have the time, and that's even the aim, to leave that space for surprises. Yeah.
Okay. You have a next slide. I
have one more, just one more, and then we can talk, deeper of whatever interests you most. So I really like this one, right? Remember Dave Kelly, the second guy I showed you? So he was asked by Steve Jobs, when Steve Jobs was, the Apple founder, when Steve Jobs was building one of his first MacBooks. So Steve Jobs asked Dave Kelly, "Can you help me with something?" So when I want to click on something with the MacBook I'm just building, I always have to write a little code. Could you find a better way to do that? Right? And I think the typical way of going would be to make the code shorter, or make it pink, or make it whatever, right? If you get that kind of thing to do. And what Dave Kelly did was he used the method of human-centered design and took a few steps back and looked at user needs, looked at how other machines work, etc., etc. And that's how he came up with the computer mouse. He was the inventor of the computer mouse. And I really like that example, right? Because it means that you don't stick in the same solution when you apply human-centered design, when you do it right and everything works out fine, but you're able to really find something new. And that, I hope, is what we can do as journalists as well.
Great.
Thank you very much. That's super interesting. Okay, so Alina, back to Stanford. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about how you got into the fellowship and how your journey to Stanford looked like.
Yeah, and let me just speak to the audience just for one short moment and say, if you do have any questions to Alina, it could be about Honduras, but mainly about design thinking and thinking as a human-centered designer when doing journalism. Please do ask. Use the chat, and we'll look at your questions and see if Alina can answer them. Go ahead, Alina.
Yeah, I would love to exchange with whoever is listening. So I can only second what Lawrence just said.
It's also viewing. It's not just Clubhouse, Alina. It's also
exactly. Much better than Clubhouse, actually. Yeah. So, as I mentioned previously, I got really interested in what's going on in Silicon Valley, right? That's a few years ago. Now all the companies are moving out of Silicon Valley, which is kind of fun to watch from afar. But still, I think the mindset is interesting to experience. And through a dear colleague of mine, I learned about that fellowship. And to be honest, I never thought that they would take me, because it's a quite prestigious fellowship. So I applied and was really hoping for it and praying, but never expected to get in, and was lucky enough to get it. And it was a year full of privileges, right? Because we were 18 fellows and from all over the world, and just to learn from them and hang out on campus and spend days and nights at the D School. That was fantastic, like a dream year, right? And then also, like at D School, they try something I find super interesting as well. They really try to group people with diverse backgrounds because they obviously say diversity helps with creativity and innovation. And so I had groups where I worked with a woman who was about to become an astronaut.
Oh.
Something I would never meet like in my normal life in Berlin, probably.
Probably not.
Those daily impulses of like, people who are just different, who think differently and do different things was fun.
So were you the only one working in media?
So this fellowship, the Jonas Knight Fellowship, is only for journalists. So we were 18, but then, you can go on campus and there are so many people, designers and obviously programmers and MBA students, whatever. So, as soon as you go out on campus, you meet all kinds of people.
Okay, so similar to studying in without a fellowship. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
We have a quick shout out from Samya Aish. It's very interesting conversation. Hi, Samya. It's so great you're watching, and a very interesting conversation. I'm enjoying this. Great to see you all. So good to have you on board, Samya.
Thank you so much.
I was wondering. It's already a bit on the advice piece, but you seem like a good evangelist for putting design thinking into the mindset and the competencies of journalists. So what would be the first thing if people are hesitant or think it's the post-it thing, right? It's what you sometimes hear. What would be your advice as the first thing to do when it comes to design thinking, applying design thinking in journalism?
Yeah. I think it would really be to care about who your user is.
Who your user is, yeah.
Yeah. So what is the user like? What is the daily life like? What is the routine like? And what is the core need for what he reaches out to news, right? Is it entertainment? Is it that he or she wants to appear smart when talking to friends in a bar? We can't go to bars right now, but that's, for example, a strong need for some people. Or what is it to really get an understanding for where they come from?
Would you liken the models by BBC World Service, which you called earlier your frenemy, but also Vogue, I think did the same thing on user needs, like inspire me, divert me, educate me, update me, stuff like that? To start with, how do we fit into their lives? What kind of need are we addressing? Would that be the first step?
Exactly. Yeah. And there are so many different variations, right? So you just mentioned the one Dmitry Shishkin, a dear colleague of ours, created, right? So he's a great guy, and other media companies copied that, and I think it's great. It's quite broad, right? So it's a great first step, but I think it's helpful to go a little deeper afterwards. He did that as well, and I would recommend that too. And then also, another part is like how does the media consumption fit into the days, right? So does the person get up and first thing in the morning, the person switches on the mobile phone and needs news? Or is it more like going for a run and wanting some more in-depth news, right? I think that can be super helpful. So everything you can find out about your user will help you get better in what you do.
So that's a great piece of advice. Nadine, may I look to the comments, because I see there are some questions. Shall we?
Of course, yeah, I've seen them too.
And we're in very good company, because this is a question by Rob Orchard, who was our guest a couple of episodes ago. So he has 3 comments and questions that go with the first one. Fascinating conversation. Thanks, everyone. Well, thank you, Rob. I'm interested in whether Alina believes that the techniques she's talking about apply only to major media organizations, which have the platforms to gain large amounts of interaction, therefore be able to extrapolate, I hope I pronounce it right, useful insights. Or is it possible for smaller organizations too? That's the first question.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Rob. I hope we can meet sometime.
Maybe after COVID.
Yeah, hopefully. So it's definitely also great and super useful for smaller organizations, because, in this empathy part we talked about just a few minutes ago, there is quantitative data and also qualitative data. And you can have that as a small media organization as well, right? And a question that comes up very often is, so with how many users do you actually speak when you create a new format? Yeah. Obviously, it depends, but the important part is that you have enough users to find out about patterns, right? So, for example, we just did a format development process for young Europeans. And just after 10 interviews, we found out that the core challenge for them right now is that they're like between 18 and 30, more or less. The core challenge for them is that their identity was shaken by Corona. For example, one guy said, I wanted to build a startup, and now I think of like really getting a secure job because I'm scared because of Corona, right? Because many people don't have any income, etc., etc. So that there's a fundamental need for advice for this generation because their identity was shaking, right? It's different than us. We already have a profession. We already have somewhere to go, etc., etc. So we saw that after only like 15 interviews. We did 15 more, nevertheless. But the point,
and you saw the pattern really emphasizing it.
Exactly. So that's the point, and that's something a smaller media organization can do just as good as larger ones.
Yeah. So there's another question by Rob. Also, how do journalists react when you give them insights from your research? Do you get pushback from more traditional or older journalists? A very good question, Rob. I like your avatar, by the way, Rob.
Yeah. Rob, I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course, there's pushback, So, for example, one very typical thing is that, and I hope that came through correctly. So, journalists always created new formats, and journalists are creative people, right? So my role is not to go there and say, hey, I know better than you guys do, right? It's more like integrating them in what they do best, and that is working creatively, just with a little add-on, and that is the user-centered path. And that's something that is really helpful, right? So the colorful bubbles, they're really fun to go through. It's really fun. So as soon as people are integrated into the process, and I really try to make them do user interviews as well. And then as soon as we are in this brainstorming process, it's fun for them and it's easy to get them along, right?
Yeah. So that was what I was going to ask. So you let them do their own user interviews as well, because I can imagine, and I might speak on Rob's behalf, I don't know, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe the more traditional or older journalists could say, no, our role is to hold power to account. I'm not going to be data driven or user driven. And what do you say to those sort of responses?
Yeah, they're right. They're right. And there is no contradiction in it, right?
Yeah.
And I think one advantage might be that I used to be a reporter, right? So I did that as well. I tried, right? I tried to do my best in holding the powerful accountable.
Yeah.
And so I think I kind of understand journalism, right? And so to put both together, to bring both together, this like, it's a great thing to do, and then to just have a little more of a look at what user needs might be. I think that's super powerful.
Great. So the questions are pouring in, I would say.
More questions. It's so great.
Yeah. Rob says that's so interesting, Alina. Thanks very much. Very inspiring. And we have another question from Samya, and then we go to Florian's question as well. But Samya first, have you worked with journalists who apply design thinking and they come from different backgrounds and cultures? And if so, what did you feel the biggest difference from the way you adopt? Yeah. Very good question. Great question.
Yeah, really great question. Thank you, Samya, for the question. So yes, actually, before I started working for Deutsche Welle, I did a class there in design thinking. And I found that really fantastic because, to be honest, sometimes when I do classes with Germans, we tend to be a little more critical, right? So they sit there like this, and they're like, so what is this? And this whole California, design thinking comes from California, so there's a lot of yay, amazing, and this and that. And Germans are like, so what is this? And when I started this class at Deutsche Welle, people were more like easier to motivate and easier to bring forward. So that was fun. And I think part of it is that there are so many different cultures in Deutsche Welle. And that motivated me. When then, I was asked to work for Deutsche Welle, I was like, yeah, sounds awesome. Because diversity is really helpful when it comes to creativity.
Okay. And if you were to go to a newsroom which doesn't have that diversity that is sort of inherent to Deutsche Welle, how would you approach then?
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if you might have some sort of ambitious goal for your next newsroom or next project.
Yeah. So I think it comes to the question what diversity means. Like, how would you define diversity, right?
Yeah.
And I think one part is that, of course, like all kinds of languages and backgrounds and this and that, but also all kinds of professions. So it's super helpful to have a designer in there because they think more visually. It's super helpful to have a data person, for example, from the media research part, because they think more like in numbers. So that can be diversity. Diversity also is, and that's something I like about Silicon Valley, even though I see obviously a lot of things very critically. They talk about diversity also in a way that brings introverts and extroverts together, right? So all of that can be diversity. And I think it's really important to have a look at, creating workshops with people who have like all kinds of backgrounds, competencies, if possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great answer. And I think Samia agrees. She says, very interesting. Thanks, Alina. Let's go on to the last question for now, and then we can go into your live demo, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a question by Florian. And I think if I pronounce right, Meissner.
Yeah.
Hi, Alina and everybody. Thank you for this inspiring session. Well, thank you, Florian, for joining us. And my question is, how do we achieve a change of journalistic mindsets to make them recognize the need to really study users and their needs?
Yeah. Great question, Florian. Thank you. So I think at least two ways are helpful. So one is when you look at the user needs before you create a new format, the probability that you're successful with the format is pretty high, right? Because if you can be really, really sure that there is a core need in a specific area and you address it with a format, then you hopefully are really successful. And that's something editors care about too, right? They want to have a great reach. They want to be successful. They want to be seen. So that's something I try to communicate. And then the other part really is to integrate them in the process. And I've seen that so many times, and it's so much fun. The first time people do conduct user interviews and they come out, and I always have that in the debriefing, right? I always do a debriefing. So how was it? What did you enjoy? What did you dislike? And there's always people saying like, wow, I've been addressing this target group forever, but I've never actually talked to a person from there. And that really opened my eyes. So those two things I think are helpful for mindset change.
Yeah, I know from a Swedish newspaper, Dagens Nyheter, it's mandatory for everyone who works there to do user research every once in a while. So they have this in sort of cycles that they have to perform these kinds to really get into the heads and everyday lives of their audience. I think it's well, it shouldn't be mandatory, but they all really appreciate it. So I think it's a good thing that's sort of like a job description on your job description. Yeah.
And I think that's a great example, Lawrence, because they're super successful, right? Like with subscriptions, they're ahead. And, all over Europe travels to see them, to find out more about how they do their job because they're so successful. So great example.
Yeah. And it's super important for the future as well. I mean, you're not always lucky to have contact to different types of people in different age groups, for example. Like my sister is 14 and she gets her news mostly from TikTok. She doesn't read any newspapers. She doesn't listen to the radio. So, of course, because of her, I know that it's very important to have different kind of media broadcasters on different platforms that are targeted to a younger audience group as well. But I mean, with the help of design thinking, of course, you're going to get different insights. So very, very important for everyone.
Yeah. So I think it's time for our next segment. That's what we call unboxing, or in this case, a live demo, which is really nice. So let me start the banner. And I think who is going to share the screen? Because we're going into
I hope it works.
Florian says thanks, by the way. So I think you've answered his question
Okay.
purposefully.
Thank you, Florian.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, everyone, for your questions. And please keep asking if you have something you would like to know.
Yeah.
So can you see my screen now? Did it work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So here's the tool I wanted to share with you. So when I started to work for Deutsche Welle, it was just 4 weeks before Corona and the lockdown started, right? So the whole process of design thinking, human-centered design, is done in workshops. How do you do workshops remotely? That was the question I asked myself right in the beginning. And also for Deutsche Welle, so as Nadine mentioned, we're in Bonn and in Berlin, but also all over the world. We have people working in Delhi, people working all over. So that's a question we have to ask ourselves also in the future. And I tried out a lot of different tools for having digital whiteboards. And there are great tools like, you might know, Miro or Mural or all kinds of other things. And I did stick to Jamboard, which is a Google tool, because it's super intuitive. And I created a test board here, as you can see, just to show you the basic functions. So you can see here, sticky note, and you can just put a sticky note on your whiteboard, and you can share this whiteboard with the whole group you're doing the workshop with.
Could you share the link with our viewers right now to see if we do this live?
Sure. Yeah. I would just need an email address, and I could share it.
You can get the link if it's possible. If we can, would that be possible?
You could change to anyone with a link, and then with restricted, it should work as well, right?
So where do I put the link?
Whoa, we have a Droste effect on it. And then if you post a comment on the right, I think you're able to post one now, right? Yeah.
To share it with everyone.
I will post it right away, and then people can try it. So there it is. I posted it. Yeah. And if you can go back to your board again.
Yes, I'll go back.
Interesting. This is sort of meta live and meta live.
What a fun!
You don't have this on Clubhouse. You can't do this, right?
Exactly. Oh. You can't see. Yeah.
So I'll put your screen back on. Yeah, there it is. And let's see which of our live viewers is going to drop a post-it note for you or a message.
Yay!
Maybe say hello as well.
Yeah.
Or whatever you feel like. and perhaps while we were waiting, I can just show you a little more. Yeah. So you can add images as well. So let's say I'm in the mountains right now. So let's say just like that, you can add. Oh, I went to Norway here. I can add like a beautiful mountain landscape, whatever. So you see the point, right? It's super easy to use. You have pens here as well. I can do a cloud here. So it's really easy to use. And what we also use it for is to introduce ourselves, right? So when we start a workshop, we introduce ourselves so that people can understand like our background a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll just get rid of that. And then
it says we need access, by the way, Alina. So you need to open it up for everyone with the link because it says access denied.
Okay. Wow.
So you use it for introductions, you say, and
then so I think I have to do that in my Google. How do I?
In your mails, right? You would have to give us access.
Yeah. So there's who wants access?
I'm looking at the rest of the chat, and there's another question. Will we will we go through into in a few moments by Marcus Webb? A fascinating session. Thank you, Marcus. It says one question: if time, does the research you've done, Alina, give you more confidence that journalism has a commercially viable future?
Oh God, all the questions are so good. So even though I'm working for a public service broadcaster right now, so I don't need to worry about the business model at the moment, I would say yes, because if you're able to get closer to the user needs and to really add value to their days, people are more likely to subscribe, right? And that's what I learned when I worked for ZEIT Online. And I was, as Nadine mentioned, in charge of this whole subscription part. So that's what we learned, right? The closer you get to, or the more you can add value to the daily life of people, I think the more likely people are to subscribe, to pay, right? So I would say yes. Definitely.
So the closer you get to their adding value to their daily lives.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Thanks for
remember. Yeah. So if you could reshare your Jamboard again, and maybe we can't give the access to everyone, but maybe you can open it up later and they'll keep the link. It was just a sort of on the fly ad hoc thought of me. Maybe it was too big of an experiment.
So I think I can see somebody here. Anne, I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, right? Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie is one of our biggest fans. She watches almost every episode. So great to have you on the Jamboard, Anne-Marie. Yeah.
Exactly. So you can start.
If you click on share and say open for everyone, then.
Oh, look, here it is.
Great.
And you're saying if I push here and then.
And then the where it says change to everyone with the link on the bottom left.
Perfect. That should do, right?
Yeah.
Now it should work, yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. So I could probably just show you until the others are, more people are joining.
Yeah.
I wanted to show you how we work with Jamboard in our workshops, just really briefly.
And Marcus says thank you, by the way.
Okay, cool. You're welcome, Marcus. So this is how we prepared one of the last big workshops we did, right? So we prepare a little bit. We remind everybody what the core questions are we're dealing with. And then we start. Lawrence, you mentioned the method Crazy 8, the brainstorming method Crazy 8 previously. So we use that. And then everybody just jumps in
the sprint book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With a lot of ideas, right? And then you can do the dot democracy, so people can put dots, what they like best, etc. Just to give you an idea of how we use the tool to work with. Let's get back here. Oh, it's getting crowded here.
Great to see everyone.
Cool.
So cool. Yeah, and then we'll see if we have any questions. But there's another segment we do, and that's the advice you have for journalists. And obviously, I need to show that banner as well. So it's called Stop It, Journalists, and that's what would your advice be? And I think you've already given us a lot of advice, so we're already very appreciative of what you told. But maybe you have some other things you want to, as a takeaway.
I really like your segments, and I also like, Lawrence, how you said in the beginning that I can also say what people should do and not what people should stop doing. I think that would be easier for me. And so we already talked. So two things. One, we already talked about it, and that is, I think it's fantastic. You mentioned Dagens Nyheter. I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but you know what I mean. So that everybody in the newsroom, even like the fantastic authors or like the management or whoever, regularly talks to users. I think that changes the mindset of media organizations. And I think that's really something we should do. So my advice would be, even if you're a fantastic author and you do great videos and you know that you never want to work in format development processes or whatever, still talk to users. It will help your work get better. So that would be.
How often would you suggest, if I might ask, how often would you suggest to talk to your users?
As a newsroom, I would say every week, and as a person, it really depends on what you do. If you're writing a process like me, as often as you can. If you're an author, perhaps every other month. I wouldn't want to put a number there. Just make it a habit to talk to users. That's really something I would recommend. And the second advice for journalists would be, because you guys said that there are people who are, young and a little older, so the audience is quite broad. Something that really helped me was to find mentors, to have people who see something in you, who see the talents you have, and to help you develop them. I think that's something really helpful, and probably especially for women, because there's not so much female leadership in media organizations right now. So I think it's extremely helpful to have somebody as a mentor to give you advice.
Yeah, good one. So the first one is talk to your users on a regular basis and just ask them what keeps them busy or worried, or what kind of dreams, ambitions they have, but also what worries them, fears, angers, perhaps. And the second one, get a mentor. And but what would you say if you said, especially for women? So what would you say to them when it comes to find a mentor?
Yeah.
Is it harder to find a female mentor in the news industry?
Probably not. So I think what helped me was to go and talk to women I admiring is a weird word, right? But I kind of admire, like women who I look up to, probably would be a better word. And to ask, hey, what was your way like? How did you do what you do? So that's a good way to find a mentor. I wouldn't even call it mentor, right? I wouldn't walk up to somebody and say, hey, do you want to be my mentor? It would be more like, hey, what's your way in journalism like and why? And I was hesitant to say, that it might be even more helpful for women, because Lawrence, I don't know whether you would not be happy with somebody who gives advice once in a while as well. So
exactly, yeah. Of course, someone who gives you honest feedback and which you can use to reflect upon the things you do, and how you can sort of improve your process, or I don't know, the quality of your article, your research. Exactly, yeah. And I know that there's a new small publication just launched online. It's called Moonshot News, and they do, as if I'm not mistaken, they are called IT and Media News Powered by Women. And they write about IT and media news powered by women. So I'll put the link in the chat. It might be of interest to our viewers as well. And our live broadcast is currently already broadcasting for over 50 minutes. And I think everyone, according to the chat, I sort of infer that people are really enjoying this. And me, myself, am enjoying this as much, I think. And I hope Nadin as well. And I hope you too, Alina.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we've got anything on the left on the agenda, Nadine. I'm looking at you to discuss or ask.
Actually, no. I think all of the tips were really great, especially considering female leadership and how to use your contacts, or how to find new inspiration by talking to women, for example. This is super important. And I think a lot of young journalists especially are very hesitant to ask for some guidance or for some help, not only guidance, but just simply asking for experiences and how other women did it. I think one thing that is missing most of the time is time itself. So a lot of journalists don't have a lot of time. So just trying to tell every female journalist, maybe take some time to share a coffee with someone, or maybe have a virtual session with a young journalist, or not only female, but especially female in this case, to help them find their way and fight themselves through the structures that we have, because it's not easy.
Absolutely. I would totally agree on that.
I have a question to you, Alina, as well, because for many years I've been wondering now, because my background is in user experience design, and I've done some programming, some code development as well, but always with a keen eye on journalism and working in journalism areas. So I'm always wondering, because you've got Dribbble and other platforms for designers to go to for inspiration and to get some sort of ad hoc coaching. You've got GitHub, StackOverflow for developers to find solutions to their coding problems. And there's always someone who's willing to help. Could you tell me why there is no platform like that where journalists can go to ask for help? And it could be on very micro, tiny things, but also on bigger questions. Yeah, I got this source I don't want to give away, or he has to be anonymous. But now I'm in this situation, and there's no forum like Stack Overflow or Dribbble for journalists, right?
Yeah.
Do you know why? Or?
Yeah. Wow, I think it's a great question because there are huge questions in journalism right now and so many ones, right? Like the business model is broken. There's so much disinformation going on, misinformation, I think you say in English. There's so much misinformation going on. So like really huge questions, the polarization of societies and what we can do.
Trust and stuff like
trust
that.
in journalism, all those things. So it's we would definitely need something like that. I think things have been changing a little bit. I realized that when I was working on subscriptions, that people are more open to share kind of business secrets right now because those challenges are so huge.
Yeah.
But we don't have a platform like that, and I don't know the reason. We would need one.
Yeah, I think so, but we might discuss it some other time. Maybe we do a clubhouse session on that later on.
Good idea.
I first need a device with iOS because I only have Android devices. But that's another thing. I think we have to wrap it up, Nadine. How about you?
Yeah, I still have one question left that was posted on Instagram actually, because before our session, I asked my followers if they have some questions for Alina. So Tolga Seat asked, can I apply for a job as a format developer at Deutsche Welle without a journalistic background? So Alina, what do you think?
Yeah, good question. So the answer is definitely yes. I do have a designer in my team who is not a journalist, and he is fantastic. So first of all, I think it's always great to have like Lawrence, like you, a coder in journalism. You know, we need you people with your smartness and your skills in journalism. So it always makes me happy to hear that, the motivation, because I'm sure you could you could gain a lot of more money in other domains, right?
I think so too. Yeah.
So I think that's great. And then for the format development process, we don't only need journalists, we also need designers and all sorts of professions. So yes, definitely yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Tolga, I hope you heard this. Thank you.
And so now we come to the end of this live broadcast, and I have to say to both of you, sehr viel Dank. Danke sehr.
Thank you very much.
First of all, to Nadine, who did a great ton of research for this this particular episode, and for asking you, Alina. So many thanks to you for offering your insights and how you came into journalism and the way you look at it and how you approach format development as well. Really insightful, really interesting. And of course, we would like to thank the viewers because they've been highly, how do you say, participative? Highly participating with this session. This is how we imagined. And we get a strong arm from Anne Mariah. Rob says, great session. So thank you. And don't forget to subscribe, of course. And Alina, will ask you back in maybe a couple of years, and I hope Nadine will be the co-host the next time as well. And do we need to say anything more? So subscribe, like, tell your friends, tell your co-workers, tell other journalists, other things, Nadine.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, for putting together this amazing format. I really enjoyed being part of it, and you've done an amazing job. So thanks for having me, and until the next time.
Yes, well, that's great to hear. And well, Ali says thank you, Nadine and Lawrence, for this amazing conversation. Marcus Webb really lifted the lockdown blues. So that's a really nice comment. So with that, I would like to say bye-bye, and thank you all for joining another episode of Future Journalism Today Live.
Thank you.
And now we have to smile into the camera because this is the end shot.